Tonight, I want to talk to you about climbing down your career ladders. Now, I know a lot of you are 2 or 3 years into preparing to climb up those ladders. Some of us are 2 or 3 decades into climbing those ladders. But tonight, I want to talk to you not about giving up, but about consciously and purposefully choosing to climb down those ladders. See, several years ago, when I was working as a financial advisor, I sat down with a couple to begin to help them plan their retirement. The husband, Jeff, had been a school teacher for 20 years, meaning that he was just 6 or 7 years away from being eligible for his full retirement pension. So you can imagine my surprise when he told me that he was going to leave at the end of that year. I said, but why would you leave when you're so close to being eligible for your full retirement? He looked me straight in the eye without missing a beat. He said, Keith, I just don't love the little bastards anymore. How many of you know someone like Jeff who just doesn't love what they do anymore? And probably more importantly, and don't answer this if you're here with your boss, but how many of you are somebody who just doesn't love what we do anymore? If that is you, don't feel bad. According to the Conference Board, less than half of all Americans actually enjoy what they do for a living. And unfortunately, research has shown that that dissatisfaction has a tendency to bleed over into other areas of our lives. In fact, psychologists have actually studied our self-reported well-being, our happiness, if you will, at different ages and stages throughout our lives. And if you're in your early 20s today, I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is you're a pretty happy bunch. The bad news is this is as good as it gets. What happens? We tend to start off our adult lives in our early 20s reporting relatively high levels of life satisfaction, well-being, again, happiness. It drops off a cliff by the time we hit our mid-20s, rebounds a little bit into our late 20s, into our early 30s, but then goes on a 20-year slide. Finally bottoming out in our mid-50s, but we have to wait till we're almost 70 years old before we report the same level of life satisfaction, well-being, as what we had in our 20s. And my question is, what happened? What is it? Thinking, what is it about our society and our culture and our lifestyle that takes the passion and energy and enthusiasm of our youth and turns us into the walking wounded by the time we're 40 or 50 years old? And probably more importantly, what can we do about it? How can we avoid the dip? We talk about sustaining our natural resources, sustaining our environment. How do you sustain the passion inside yourself so that you can take your own dreams, your own goals, your own ideas and turn those into reality? I was a financial advisor for 15 years. Over that time, I literally met with thousands of people. And every day we'd sit down and we'd talk not just about their money, but about their hopes and dreams and where they wanted to go. And I can tell you that most of those folks did not, as Stephen Covey would say, have their career ladder against the right wall. Now, most of us, when we get out of college, we have to take that career ladder and place it against 2 or 3 different walls before we finally find one that may not be perfect, may not be exactly what we want, but out of necessity, it's close enough. So we start to climb. We spend 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years climbing that career ladder until one day, out of nowhere, this little voice begins to rise up from deep down inside and says, is this it? Is this really all there is? When my clients started to hear that little voice, that was the moment they called me. Because you see, as their financial advisor, I held the keys to the adult version of their dreams. Financial freedom and retirement. I don't know what you were thinking. I'm talking about financial freedom and retirement. Every day for 15 years, I had people come into me and ask the same questions over and over again. Keith, how much longer do I have to work here? How soon can I retire? How long before I can finally go do what I've always wanted to do? And you know what? We think of this as a middle-age problem. It's not. Forbes just ran an article just recently talking about how young women in particular are burning out before they even reach 30 years old. The problem is that even though that adult dream of retirement might still be 10, 15, maybe 20 years or more away, we invest so much of ourselves into climbing that ladder. We put in so much time, so much energy, so much effort into climbing that ladder that the idea of actually climbing back down is just incomprehensible. But eventually, when that the little voice starts to talk to us, we've got to make a choice. Are we going to stick it out for retirement, or are we going to climb back down that ladder and follow our passion? I can tell you 98, maybe 99% of my clients chose retirement. And that was the moment their dreams died. Now, I do have to confess that I was an accomplice in killing some of those dreams. As their financial advisor, it was my job to help them get to retirement. And if we want to look at it from purely a financial perspective, if we're not worried about living a life of passion and purpose and meaning, if we're just looking at it from purely a financial perspective, then yeah, in a lot of times, a lot of cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases, just sticking it out on that ladder is the best financial decision. But what price do you put on your passion? What price do you put on your passion? I didn't understand that question. When Jeff told me that he was going to leave his job just a few years shy of being eligible for his retirement pension, I thought he was nuts. I thought he was absolutely nuts. But the universe has a way of teaching us lessons that we need to learn. And so about 10 years into my 15-year career as an advisor, that little voice started talking to me. Started saying, is this it? Is this really all there is? All of a sudden, I was faced with the very same dilemma that all my clients had. Man, do I climb back down the ladder, go follow my passion, or do I stick it out for retirement? I was a financial advisor. What do you think I chose? Absolutely, I was looking at retirement. I started running the numbers on myself, thinking, man, if I can just save a little more, just work a little harder, just invest a little better. But even though that voice was getting louder and louder, I just kept stuffing it back down. And the harder I worked and the more I saved, the more and more miserable, day by day, bit by bit, I became. And it all came to a head one day when I woke up with a headache and realized that I'd been waking up with the same headache for the last 3 months. Went to the doctor, he ran a bunch of tests, and in a voice that was kind of like talking about the weather, asking for fries with his burger, my doctor said, Keith, you've got a brain tumor. Now, I'm not sure how someone is supposed to react when they get that kind of news. I'm thinking fear, shock, anger, disbelief. I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to have the kind of reaction I had, which was, yes! I was thrilled! I finally had an ironclad excuse to leave my job that nobody can argue with. Folks, that's just sick. It took a month and 3 second opinions before the reality and the severity of the situation finally sunk in, because all my doctors agreed on 2 things. Number 1, based on the size and location of this tumor, it had to come out. I was going in for surgery. But number 2, and this is the good news, that it wasn't urgent. I had some time. So, as it turns out, some buddies and I had a trip planned out to Moab, Utah. We were going to go out to Moab for a week of rock climbing and mountain biking, all the things that Moab is known for. So I thought, I'll go out to Moab, spend the week, come back, have the surgery, all will be good. So we go out to Moab. One day we hire a guide to take us high up onto the plateau outside of Moab, and we start hiking back down through the slot canyons. And eventually, we come out on the top of one of these natural stone arches that kind of dot the landscape all around Moab. This particular arch was called Morning Glory Arch, and it stands 140 feet in the air. The idea was we were going to rappel off of this arch. So the guide goes out to the middle of the arch, but rather than anchor a rope into the rock, He actually ties 2 ropes together, throws one end off one side of the arch, throws the other end off the other side of the arch, and then 2 of us would walk up to the arch, clip into the rope, inch our way out to the edge, sit down with our feet dangling 140 feet in the air. Now remember, this is with no anchor. And on the count of 3, we each would very gently shift our weight off of the arch onto the rope, using the other person's weight as a counterbalance to our own as we rappelled down. Ladies and gentlemen, that was one of the craziest things I have ever done in my life. It was a huge adrenaline rush. We get down to the bottom of this thing, we are high-fiving each other, just running around with adrenaline like crazy. And I noticed that one of the guys who had come down a few moments earlier was sitting off to the side, and he had pulled out this crazy little piece of paper that had a bunch of tiny squares on it. And so I walked up to him and I said, "What is this?" He said, "It's my reminder." "Okay, what's it remind you of?" He said, "The 52 rows across the top represent the 52 weeks in a year. The 80 rows down the side represent 80 years in the average lifetime, meaning that each little square represents a week in our lives." He said, "For the first 20 years of our lives, our parents pretty much make all of our decisions for us. But after that, it's up to us." He said, "When I have a bad week, when I'm not following my passion, when I'm not having fun doing the things that I love to do, I feel that square in black." He said, "When I'm having a good week, when I'm out with my friends, rappelling off of arches and doing all the kinds of crazy things that we've been doing this week," he says, "I feel that square in red. But I use red very specifically as a warning, because too much red means that I'm not necessarily pursuing my passion. I can spend all my time just having fun, but that doesn't mean that I'm accomplishing the things that I really want to accomplish." He said, "The goal is to have as much green as possible. I fill in the square green when I've had a week when I'm following my passion, when I'm pursuing my goals. I may not be accomplishing everything, but I'm moving forward towards those things that are most important to me." He says, "The goal is to have as much green as possible." A few weeks later, as I was at home recovering from surgery, which, by the way, the tumor was benign and all is good there. Thank you. But I thought about this. So I sat down on my computer and I created my own little 52 by 80 grid. And I started looking back over my calendar, started filling in the colors. And it didn't take long to realize that while I had a fair amount of red on my grid, I had a whole lot of black and very little green. And I realized that I'd been doing the same thing that my clients had done. I was afraid to climb back down the ladder, go pursue my passions. I had forfeited the last 3 or 4 years. And at that point, at least, I'd had every intention of forfeiting the next 10 or 15 or however long it was going to take me to get to retirement. It took about all the courage that I had and some long conversations with my wife, who was just extraordinarily supportive. But about 2 weeks before I was supposed to go back to work, I called my boss and resigned. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it's been easy since then. Anyone who stands up here and tells you that following your passion is easy is wrong. It's hard. It's a whole lot easier just to sit on that ladder. Jim Collins says that the enemy of great is good. I would suggest to you that the enemy of passion is comfort. It's just a lot easier to sit on that ladder and continue to do the things you've always done. Whether that voice is talking to you today, or it doesn't rise up inside you for another 5, 10, 15 years, someday that voice is going to talk to you. And you're going to have to make a choice. Am I going to climb down the ladder, pursue my passion, or am I just going to forfeit the next 10, 15, however many years until I reach retirement? When you get to that point, and you've got to make that decision, I would suggest you ask yourself just one question. How green is your life? Thank you.